Have you guys ever had a moment where you came to Marston Quad at night and just lie on the grass like this and look at the sky and you think about life and look at the stars and come up with some inspirations? Inspired, you might come back to your dorm and get a piece of paper and jot down some thoughts, and maybe even come up with a significant scientific advancement. Ever since the ancient times, people were looking at the night sky and seeing those bright spots all over it, and people were wondering, what are those? Are those brilliance of the sky, or are those eyes of some mysterious creatures looking at us? So people tried to connect everything they see there to everyday life. For example, comets are very well documented in different cultures because of their significant visibility that they change the night view of the sky. The first ever documented comet was by the Chinese in 300 BC, and it was recorded that it related to some significant event on the Earth. This comet right here, it says in the ancient Chinese that a general died, or some other comments that will signify some other fortunate or unfortunate events. And we can see people were starting to connect everything they see in the sky with their everyday lives ever since then. On the European side, one of the most well-documented comet has got to be Halley comet. It is named Halley because the guy whose name is Halley proposed that it was a comet that revolved around the sun every 76 years. So, in 1066, during the Battle of Hastings, this comet appeared in the sky, which was the first documented drawing. Well, it was like a painting on a tapestry shown right here of the comet that basically changed the entire view of the sky, and people were thinking that heaven has come because they've never seen something like this before. It is important for us to point out here that the comet is portrayed as a star, not as a comet or as a planet. And for the consecutive 7 centuries, it was also portrayed as a star, as can be seen here, as they all shared the star-like attribute. However, after Renaissance and Enlightenment, where people's knowledge of cosmos and physics increased exponentially, people realized that the comets are not stars, they are like flying objects of our solar system. In the 1758 painting of the Halley comet, it became a circular object instead of a star-like shape. As centuries pass and science advances, many cosmic bodies that are interesting to astronomers cease to be visible to the naked eye. Even back in Galilean times, the Jupiter's moons were barely visible with the telescope, the Galileo scope. So now, for example, the black holes, they're not visible at all. But then, remember, in 2019, we actually had a picture of the black hole. How did that happen? Surprisingly or not, it was not just someone who went to the telescope and took a picture and be like, oh, it's a black hole. It was a decade-long collaboration between scientists around the world using the microwave telescopes to capture the black hole in the center of the M87 galaxy on different angles throughout basically 10 years. And then they combined all the data together to have a data plot with emissions of the ionized gases around the black hole, because black hole itself doesn't emit anything. Everything that goes near it will get sucked in. But then the highly heated accelerated gas around the black hole is ionized, and from ionization the light comes off, and that is the signal that we can receive on Earth. So how did we get the yellow donut? That is totally an artistic choice by the scientists at the ZTH University in Switzerland. It was their choice to choose the brighter yellow and orange colors to show the emission rate of the gases that are near the black hole. So basically they had a mathematical interpretation of data points, and then they put coloring over it, and the coloring was totally man-made. If you just look at a black hole, you're not going to see anything that's yellow like that. This coloring was made so people like us who cannot really look at the data plots of radio emissions of a black hole can easily perceive what is happening in there. We have a black hole in the middle and some gas flowing on the side. Now you guys might be wondering, why astrophysicists even try to color the black holes? They are the ones who can read the data points, and if they took a picture of the black hole, they are satisfied. But the thing is, they are getting funding usually by the government or some other companies. And these companies are getting their money from normal people like us. And if we people were not supportive of what they are doing, then we would not give them money. And if they don't have money, they cannot do their research. In fact, there was a research published by the Pew Research Center, which is a very big and prestigious research center doing surveys. And their surveys show that 80% of Americans are supportive of the investment into NASA. It is the same situation here. Most of NASA's astrophysics and aerospace engineering researches are way out of comprehension for majority of people. Then how do they even connect those things to people to make them happy? The problem is, the pictures they capture of say exoplanets or even the small dwarf planets in our solar system as depicted here is literally few pixels on the telescope's CCD, which is basically a camera unit. But how do they turn these pixels into these kind of very nice colorful planets? It is pretty similar to the one with the black hole. Scientists gather data and then they interpret the data and tell the artist about what they're looking for, and the artists will add some of their own artistic aesthetic about how planets are supposed to look like to turn these into planets. NASA, for example, founded the space art program in the 50s specially for this purpose. This is where artists and scientists collaborate to combine their mathematical data with human imagination, which actually turns out to be quite accurate in many instances. For example, Lucien Radal, he's an artist who never went to space, but still managed to paint extremely accurate surfaces of the moon and the Mars in the 20s. Back then, it was widely accepted that moon's surface is very rippled, something like this. But Lucien used his observations of the moon's surface using a telescope and some relative geometry to realize that the moon's surface is not rippled at all. It is more or less flat with some mountainous terrain, more or less like this. If we compare this painting with the first picture NASA took on the moon, it's actually pretty similar. But again, Lucien never left Earth, and he managed to portray the moon's surface as nicely as the real one. But what about the other side of the space race, the Soviet Union? The Soviet space experience was pretty much a part of daily life of our Soviet citizens, where designers of different objects really took care to incorporate their space developments into everyday objects. For example, here we have a pencil case with an engraved rocket, and we have vacuum cleaner that's shaped like a planet. Even Soviet children are excited by the call of space. A lot of playgrounds feature some elements from space art. These children will find their interest in space exploration, and when they grow up, they will be on the cutting edge of the sciences and advance them. With all these, Soviet citizens will feel that they are part of the space exploration their government is conducting, and they will feel proud and support the government, and of course with an aid of cosmic art. Now it is obvious that Cold War superpowers use space art to influence people into supporting them. But what about China? Their space industry is booming in our modern days. What about their space art? We have to remember that China was not a significant player during the Cold War, because it was not in a great shape during that time. There was 100 years of humiliation, where the Qing dynasty and the early Chinese transition countries were so weak that they were bullied by Western nations. So one of the main goals and one of the very effective governmental propaganda was to emphasize that space race or space exploration is an attempt to catch up with the Western nations, which is something that, Chinese citizens after 100 years of humiliation really wanted. But China took a little bit different approach other than Soviet Union or the USA. For example, Soviet Union space art is mainly avant-garde, but Chinese space art mainly features Chinese traditional figures, and in fact, a lot of satellites that are being launched today, they bear traditional figures' names. Chinese culture puts an accent on history and traditions. So, government has to somehow connect whatever people perceives as their cultural thing, as their own thing, to the space exploration they are doing. That's why the space art features those traditional figures, which is very relatable to everyone regardless of their education level, especially because Chinese space art was developed in the late 60s and early 70s, where the average education level was still very low. With everything being said, we can see that space art plays a significant role in humanity's advancements in science. Thank you for watching my video, and see you guys soon.